Hey guys, it's Madison. Today I'm reviewing Pendulum Grim, a collection of short stories by E.R. Bills. Before I begin, I want to mention that one of the stories in this collection has sexual abuse themes in it, so if that is a trigger for you, please leave now. I don't want anyone to feel bad at the end of this video. Okay, I'm just gonna jump right in. This is one of the best horror collections that I've read in a long time. My favorite story in this collection was The Halloween in Me. This story is about a guy whose neighbor passes away, and Halloween decorations keep popping up in his neighbor's yard. No one knows how they're showing up or who's doing it. I have neighbors who go all out for Halloween with the life-size decorations and skeletons, so it was really easy for me to imagine this story. Having said that, it's not the horror but the human elements that make this story so appealing to me. This story explores the possibilities of the afterlife. Although there are hints of cosmic horror, including a hellish idea of what the afterlife might be like, it's the desire of humans wanting to stay connected to each other that makes this story so heartfelt and enjoyable. The most disturbing story in this collection was Recumbent Female Nude. Caleb kidnaps a prostitute after she sustains a head injury, and instead of getting her medical attention, he sexually abuses her while waiting for her to die so that he can commit acts of necrophilia. For me, this story brought to mind the Brock Turner case, but there have no doubt been countless other cases of men violating unconscious girls. This story gets into the mind of a sadistic predator in a way that will twist your stomach. It reminded me of some of Stephen King's darker stories and a little bit of Matt Shaw. Having said that, this story doesn't feel like shock for the sake of shock, which is a common problem in many horror stories. It doesn't shy away from the dark subject matter, but it doesn't feel exploitative either. Rather than focusing on the sexual act itself, the story focuses on Caleb's mental state and ultimately his depravity. This story perfectly illustrates objectification of women. Caleb just wants a female body that he can have complete control over. Psychologists believe that necrophiliacs and those that have similar fetishes, that it stems from wanting complete control over a partner, usually because they are pathologically afraid of rejection. Caleb felt very realistic to me and very grounded in what psychologists know about necrophilia. I've never seen objectification explored before in quite this way. Despite the fact that this story is so disturbing that I had to set it aside a few times before I could finish it, I feel like this is one of the best horror short stories I've read in a long time in terms of subtext and cathartic release. Although this story is not for the faint of heart, I do think that it is the strongest story in this collection. I was impressed by the opening story, Minerva's Vision. This story is about a woman who can see the future, and she puts predictions and helpful advice in fortune cookies of her restaurant patrons. The story begins with the implication that she stopped working there because she foresaw something terrible happening, and the story only gets more grim from there. I thought that this story had excellent characterization of the main character and a lot of depth for such a short story. The ending is one that I did not see coming, and I thought that it was bittersweet and strangely romantic, and it definitely suited the story. The story that the collection takes its title from is another one of my favorites. Pendulum Grim is about a woman that finds a journal from real-life author Ambrose Bierce, who disappeared mysteriously in 1913. This story reminds me of some documentaries that I've seen on cursed objects. You can tell from this story that the author has experience writing nonfiction because he blends elements of real life and fiction so well. One of the stories that I kind of overlooked the first time I read this collection was The Judge. The Judge is about a cop who is taking a murder confession from a judge who just killed his wife. During the story, both the judge and the cop slowly begin to remember how the cop knew the judge when he was a boy and how the judge had kept one of the boy's secrets when he was a kid, which creates a very interesting power dynamic. I feel like The Judge is about the ramifications of guilt and what that can do to a person. I picked up on that the first time I read it, but as I was rereading it, I realized that the horror in this story doesn't come from the story within a story about the horrible thing that those boys did to that frog, but rather it's about shame and guilt and the heaviness of those emotions. I also really like the bookends in that story. I don't want to spoil it by going into too much depth, but the phrase "broke my pillow" within the context of the story kind of becomes a metaphor for one losing their peace of mind or even their sanity, and I thought that bringing that phrase back at the end was a really good way to wrap up that story. If you've read Pendulum Grim, I'd love to know what your thoughts are on this collection. If you like this video, please hit that like button and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.